This is Whisper from History, where forgotten voices rise again. You might think Hitler's entire family stood with Germany, but the truth is, they didn't. Adolf Hitler had a nephew, William Patrick Hitler, who didn't fight for the Nazis, he fought for America. Imagine, the nephew of the world's most feared dictator, wearing the US Navy uniform, standing under the American flag against his own blood. Stay till the end, because today, you'll uncover the hidden truth about Hitler's nephew. The story begins, not in the grand halls of Berlin or the roaring streets of Munich, but in a quiet house in Liverpool, England. The year was 1911, and a boy was born who would carry a surname that the world would come to fear and despise. His name was William Patrick Hitler, the nephew of Adolf Hitler. From the moment he drew his first breath, the boy could not have imagined that his life would one day be twisted into the machinery of history, caught between family and fate, between loyalty and survival, between the shadows of tyranny and the promise of freedom. William's father, Alois Hitler Jr., was Adolf's half-brother. Alois had moved from Austria to England in search of work and stability, but instead, he found conflict. He married a young Irish woman named Bridget Dowling, and together, they had their only child, William. Yet the marriage was fraught with turmoil. Alois abandoned the family when William was still a child, returning to Germany and leaving Bridget to raise the boy alone. The absence of a father marked William deeply, but what left an even greater imprint was the presence of his infamous uncle, a man whose name he shared and whose shadow he could never escape. Growing up in Liverpool, William lived an ordinary life in extraordinary times. His mother struggled to provide, but she nurtured in him an independence and resilience that would later define his path. The First World War ravaged Europe, and stories of his distant relatives in Austria were far removed from his daily life. He was just another boy in a working-class neighborhood, with no hint that one day his family connection would tie him directly to the most hated man in human history. When Adolf Hitler rose to prominence in the 1920s, William became aware of his uncle's name echoing across Europe. At first, it was simply a curiosity, a strange coincidence that the loud and angry politician in Germany shared his blood. But as Adolf's speeches grew louder, as his party gained ground, as his symbols spread like wildfire, William realized that this connection was both a burden and an opportunity. By the early 1930s, William traveled to Germany. He was curious to meet the uncle he had only heard about. Adolf was not yet the dictator of a continent, but he was on the verge of absolute power. The meeting was both chilling and strange. Adolf, already obsessed with loyalty and bloodlines, looked at his nephew with suspicion but also with a sense of obligation. William was family, after all, and family could be used. William was offered small jobs and favors, a chance to profit from his uncle's rise. He worked at a bank, later at a car factory. But what he truly wanted was a life of privilege, a chance to rise alongside his powerful relative. He asked Adolf for better positions, for influence, for wealth. At times, he threatened to reveal embarrassing family stories if his demands were not met. The relationship became a dangerous game of blackmail and manipulation, played in the heart of a regime that tolerated neither. In private, Adolf was furious with his nephew. He called him a loathsome creature and considered having him silenced. But William had something that no one else had, the Hitler name, carried in the free world, beyond Germany's borders. To make him vanish would cause scandal. To keep him close meant constant irritation. Their relationship teetered on the edge of violence. William's visits to Germany exposed him to the dark reality of Nazism. He saw the growing cult of personality, the militarization of society, the fervent devotion that ordinary Germans showed to his uncle. What began as a chance to benefit from power turned into a moral reckoning. He was disturbed by the brutality, the propaganda, the blind hatred aimed at Jews and anyone who dared oppose the party. He began to fear for his own life. His uncle's paranoia grew, and William's usefulness diminished. By 1938, William decided He could not remain entangled in the Nazi world. He left Germany and traveled to the United States, where he tried to build a new life. But he carried with him not just his belongings, but the weight of his name. America was both fascinated and repelled by the young man who was the nephew of Adolf Hitler. Newspapers wrote about him, talk shows sought his presence, and audiences were eager to hear his perspective on the man across the ocean who threatened the world. In lecture halls and theaters, William spoke about his uncle, warning Americans of the danger he posed. He described Adolf as unstable, dangerous, consumed by ambition. His talks drew attention, but also suspicion. Was he a spy? Was he an opportunist, profiting from his family ties? Or was he genuinely trying to warn the world? In a nation that was still clinging to isolationism, his warnings were dismissed by some as sensationalism. Yet the truth of his words would soon become undeniable. When war finally broke out in 1939, William found himself in an impossible position. He was a Hitler in name, but an enemy of Hitler in conscience. He wanted to fight, but where did he belong? In Germany, he was seen as a traitor. In Britain, he was regarded with suspicion. In America, he was distrusted. But in his heart, he knew he had to stand against his uncle. William wrote directly to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, offering his services to the United States. The letter was bold and heartfelt. He declared that he was willing to shed his blood to defeat the man who shared his name, to prove that not all Hitlers were consumed by hate. Roosevelt considered the offer, and eventually, William was permitted to enlist in the U.S. Navy in 1944. For William, this was not just military service. It was redemption. It was proof to himself, to his mother, and to the world that his loyalty lay not with tyranny, but with freedom. He trained alongside ordinary Americans, men who at first looked at him with skepticism, whispering about his last name. But in the barracks, on the training grounds, under the harsh discipline of military life, William became just another sailor, a man fighting not for his uncle's empire, but for its destruction. He served as a pharmacist's mate, providing medical assistance to his comrades. He was no longer the nephew of the dictator. He was a brother in arms, patching wounds, offering comfort, saving lives. In the midst of war, under the sound of gunfire and the shadow of death, he proved himself to the men beside him. He fought for America with courage and humility, never asking for special treatment, never flaunting his infamous connection. His service lasted 3 years, from 1944 until 1947. He was honorably discharged, carrying with him the quiet pride of having stood against his own blood. For William, the war was not only a global conflict, but a deeply personal one. He had fought against the man who had terrorized the world, the uncle who had nearly destroyed civilization. After the war, William faded into obscurity. He changed his last name to Stuart Houston, seeking to escape the curse of his bloodline. He married a German-born woman, raised 4 sons, and built a quiet life in Long Island, New York. He opened a small laboratory, lived in a modest house, and tried to bury the past. He never again sought the spotlight, never published memoirs, never cashed in on his story. His children grew up American, far removed from the shadows of their radicals' crimes, and yet, the weight of history never completely left him. Neighbors whispered, reporters occasionally came knocking, and the story of Hitler's nephew would resurface every few decades, reminding the world of this strange twist of fate. William himself rarely spoke about it. He lived as a private man, perhaps haunted, perhaps relieved, perhaps both. The irony of his life is one of the most human in history. A nephew, bound by blood to the architect of genocide, chose to fight against him. A man carrying a cursed name found dignity in serving under a different flag. In the Great War of the 20th century, He stood not with family, but with conscience. He proved that even in the darkest legacies, there can be defiance, redemption, and the courage to choose another path. William Patrick Hitler died in 1987, buried quietly in the United States. His grave carries no mark of his infamous uncle, only the name he had chosen, the life he had built, and the silence he left behind. Few people visit, few people even know, but in the sweep of history, his story remains a reminder that blood does not dictate destiny, that even in the shadows of evil, a man can choose to stand with the free world. His life was messy, full of contradictions, ambition, resentment, and courage. He was not a saint, not a perfect hero. But when the moment came to choose between tyranny and liberty, between family and humanity, William Hitler chose to wear the uniform of the United States Navy, and in doing so, he forever rewrote the meaning of his cursed name. William chose not to break the bond of blood, but instead, he tied his destiny to the American flag. He proved that more than blood, it is a person's choices that truly matter. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next chapter of history. This was Hitler's Nephew Fought for America, part of our Dark History collection, but the shadows don't end here. In this playlist, you'll uncover more untold stories, equally chilling, equally unforgettable, so keep watching the Dark History playlist, and subscribe to Whisper from History where every whisper reveals a shadow the past tried to hide. This video is narrated by an AI voice, script and editing done by human.